Let us pray. O God, our help in ages past, our hope for years to come. O God, source of life, joy, and true freedom, we thank you, Lord, as we celebrate our nation's anniversary of independence. We feature many community events, and our schools highlight our history and culture. We now pause for prayer to reflect with thanksgiving on the countless blessings you have bestowed on this country. We give thanks for all those who have served your people within this place as parliamentarians, and for those who now serve. We acknowledge once again the words of our anthem. The Lord has been the people's guide for past 300 years, and with him still on the people's side, we have no doubts or fears. Bless every Barbadian and those who reside in our land. Send your Holy Spirit on our elected leaders as we think of your holy word, and give them the prudence of Solomon in their deliberations. And may we all heed your word. If my people who call upon my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, I will hear from heaven and forgive their sin and heal their land. So may all be done this day for your honor and glory. Amen. Let's say the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Good morning. This House is now in session. Minutes of the meeting held on Tuesday, the 18th of November 2025, to be deferred.
To be deferred.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that the said minutes be deferred.
I beg that the side minutes be deferred. All those in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
Announcements by Your Honor, the Deputy Speaker. Messages from Her Excellency, the President. Petitions, papers, government notices, private members' notices, notices of questions, reports from select committees, first readings of bills, statements by ministers, congratulatory and/or obituary speeches, personal explanations, motions for leave of absence, oral replies to questions, notices of motion for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance, orders of the day. Suspension.
Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of Standing Orders 6, 16, 18, 20, 42.5, 43, and 44 for the remainder of the day's sitting.
The question is that the said mentioned standing orders be suspended. All those in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say no. I think that the ayes have it.
Government business, sir.
Government business is the order of the day.
Order number 9, in the name of the Honourable Prime Minister, Minister of Finance, Culture, National Security and Public Service, to move the second reading of the Constitution Amendment Bill 2025.
Honourable Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak on this debate, with respect to two bills which are before this Honourable Chamber. One is the Constitutional Amendment Bill 2026, and the other is the Parliament Miscellaneous Provisions Bill 2025, and the other one is the Parliament Miscellaneous Provisions Bill 2025. And we will, with the concurrence of the House, treat to a cognate debate with respect to these two bills because they are completely interrelated. Let me at the outset say, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that this is
The question is that these two bills be a cognate debate. All those in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
Thank you. Let me at the outset say that this is a constitutional amendment bill that seeks to deal with three things, but has really been occasioned in timing predominantly by one, and that is the amendment necessary for the Electoral and Boundaries Commission to be able to look and do its work because of an error which took place a few years ago. Many years ago, when we were last in government, we came upon the same difficulty because under the Constitution, the difference between constituencies must fall within a specified range. And typically, the initial one, which we had, was between 90% below or 110% above. In other words, every constituency's numbers must fall within 10% of each other. Under the last Barbados Labour Party administration, and then Prime Minister, the late Owen Arthur, we would have agreed to amend this to carry it to 85% and 115%, giving it the 15% range. And by some unfortunate episode, when we amended the Constitution in 2021, this went back to 90 to 110%, the 10% range. The reality is that the demographics of Barbados have so changed, and we all know that we're going through an enumeration process, but the demographics of the country have so changed that even with the current situation, we would have literally to redraw lines across every constituency, in some instances that would make them totally unrecognizable in order to be able to fit back into those numbers. And we recognize that that would change the character of representation completely. And the Electoral and Boundaries Commission, in its note to me, recommended that that range now go from 80% to 120%. In other words, a 20% range between constituencies, such that it would bring us more into line with what we have today, recognizing that there are some constituencies that are naturally larger and some constituencies that are naturally smaller. And this is really the reason, the primary reason why this bill is here today, largely because, as you know, we have to receive from them a report which is late, but which, in their estimation, needs to be done with respect to, one, the completion of the enumeration process, and two, the ranges changing in the Constitution so that they do not have to do radical surgery to what each and every constituency looks like. And that is the simple reason for that particular amendment. I am not going to get into any broader issues at this stage, largely because this is all that this amendment seeks to do, to create the range between constituencies such that we do not have to have radical surgery with respect to them. The last time boundaries were changed in this country was the year 2003, and before that, the year 1991. And in each of those instances, they were able to try to get to a relatively easy position. The truth is that over the course of the last 22, 23 years, the demographic shifts in Barbados have seen greater settlements move into St. Philip, St. Thomas, to a lesser extent, parts of Christchurch, parts of St. George, and St. Peter, ironically, also is reasonably high for a northern constituency, given the diminution in numbers that you've seen over the years in St. Joseph, St. Andrew, St. Lucy, etc. The second reason for the amendment, sir, relates to the fact that we have, for some time, been reflecting on the fact, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that the Speaker in the Parliament of Barbados is at a disadvantage. The Speaker in the Parliament of Barbados, as you well know, sir, when you sit in this chair occasionally, very occasionally, does not get to speak on behalf of their constituents. And in the United Kingdom, where a similar circumstance, happens, there is a convention that no party runs any candidate or no individual runs against the Speaker once the Speaker has been elected. I want to repeat myself, sir, that no person runs against the Speaker, because everyone recognizes that the Speaker is peculiarly handicapped by reason of the fact that they are not allowed to take part in the debate because they themselves have to preside over the very debate, and you cannot be a judge in your own cause. That is one of the basic principles of natural justice. We have a choice, because other than what is done in the United Kingdom, in our own region, in a number of Caribbean countries, St. Lucia, I believe St. Vincent and the Grenadines as well, Trinidad and Tobago, a Speaker can be chosen from outside of the elected members in an election. And when we were reflecting as to which one should happen, it was the view of the government that the more palatable way for Barbados is not to argue that no one should run against the Speaker, because we would have a hard time trying to explain that in the context of our culture. But that, like other Caribbean islands, that we should move to a point where the Speaker can be elected from outside of the elected members. The Speaker will still be elected by the Parliament. Obviously, if the government has the majority numbers, the government gets effectively to choose who that Speaker is, in the same way that the government will choose who the Speaker is in the current set of circumstances, because as you know, the Speaker still has to be elected from among the members of the House, even under the current system. The difference would be that instead of the person coming from the elected members in an election with a constituency, that the person would come from someone who has not been elected at the polls in a constituency. And it is as simple as that. The Parliamentary Reform Commission, in its majority opinion, felt that we should keep the status quo. The minority opinions proffered felt that it should go. The government finds itself associating with the minority opinion, because I have seen over 31 years in this chamber and 3.5 years in the other chamber, the extent to which it does put a serious hardship on speakers, because people feel that they're not representing them, they're not speaking for them, they don't hear you talking about them. And I don't think it is fair, and I think as we move forward, this is one of the things that we would wish to be able to do. Secondly, with respect to an improvement in our governance, this simple bill seeks to give ministers the right of audience in the other chamber, whichever is the other chamber for them. And let me be very clear, sir. In this House of Assembly, you will find the majority of the cabinet, the executive. Those who sit in this House have the benefit on the majority of portfolios to have a clear explanation, history, and any other kind of discussion, because the minister who has charge of that portfolio is here with his public servants and is expected to answer the questions. However, if you are debating a matter where, for example, the minister is in the other chamber, in the Senate, in this instance, it might be the Ministry of Health, it might be the Ministry of Energy and Business, it might be the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Technology. Take, for example, some of the bills that are currently before this Honourable Parliament, like the Human Transplant Bill. The Minister of Health does not sit in here. Now, we're lucky that in this particular instance, we have a Minister of State in the Ministry of Health. But in the other two ministries, there is no representative inside this honourable chamber for them. And in those circumstances, therefore, while persons will carry the brief, they will never have command of the portfolio and the knowledge in the same way that the minister who has it by law will have. The truth is that in some instances, this has proven to be problematic, particularly more in the Senate, because the majority of ministers sit in the House and not vice versa. And therefore, giving a minister a right of audience on their portfolio, only their portfolio, but with no right to vote, is what this bill seeks to do. And if you look at it, the truth is that at clause 3, where we deal with this amendment, it makes it clear that the minister may attend any sitting of the House, the Senate, or the House of Assembly. That will be on their own initiative. Or they may be required at the instance of the President of the Senate or the Speaker to attend any sitting of the Senate or the House of Assembly, respectively. But in that instance, that can only happen where the Speaker or the President wants them to come by the adoption of a motion for the purpose of securing their attendance. What is clear is that at clause 3, where it amends section 53A of the Constitution, the new section 53A subsection 3 makes it clear that they may speak only on any motion before the House or the Senate concerning their portfolio, 3 and 4, and they may allow for the amendments, but they will not have a vote thereon. And that is the most critical part for what we're doing. This is relatively common. It happens in Trinidad and Tobago. It happens in some of the other Caribbean parliaments. The truth is that some of our parliaments are unicameral, so that is not an issue at all. But because Barbados still has 2 houses, a bicameral parliament, it is an issue because as we speak now, none of us in here have a right of audience in the other place. And none in the other place have a right of audience in here. Secondly, it seeks to give the Attorney General the ability to be able to move at the 53A4 to be able to speak in either house on any matter. And why? The internal logic of this is that nothing can come before the Honourable House of Assembly or the Senate without the certification of the Attorney General, whether it is a resolution or a bill. And therefore, the Attorney General is going to be required to be the glue that keeps the legislative calendar and the parliamentary calendar going. Now, that may have implications for the future because it means a much higher load on the Attorney General, and we will probably see more and more an Attorney General as a dedicated Attorney General rather than carrying other wider portfolios, largely because of the need to make sure that this process is fluid and seamless with respect to the parliamentary business of both houses. Sir, there is nothing more mysterious about these three amendments. I had the honor of meeting with the Honourable Leader of the Opposition when we met to determine whether and how we would address the issue of the presidency of this country. And we had good discussions that led clearly to the joint nomination of a president. This, among other things, was also discussed and was not seen to be controversial. And I thank the Leader of the Opposition for his position on these matters with respect to this particular provision and with respect to the provision with respect to the Speaker. We did not speak on the matter of the Electoral and Boundaries Commission, but he has members, as you know, 2 members of that commission are representatives of the Leader of the Opposition. And you may ask why. One was nominated by the previous Leader of the Opposition, but I believe that he finds full favor with the current Leader of the Opposition. And if I'm speaking outside of my limits, then please let me know. But to my certain knowledge, when they attended the Constitutional Reform Commission, that Deputy Chairman accompanied the Honourable Leader of the Opposition. So if I'm making assumptions that I should not make, I am more than willing to correct them and to stand corrected and to apologize. With respect to the second member, the other current member who was on the commission is now a candidate for the Leader of the Opposition, and in fact I believe is running in the seat that the Leader of the Opposition is currently holding. And he had the honor of appointing another member whom we have appropriately put and in place. I believe all the work has been done. In fact, I believe that she is now on an electoral observer mission in another Caribbean country with His Honor the Speaker. And in those circumstances, that commission has now been appropriately constituted. In the circumstances, sir, the only thing left for me to explain is why these 3 amendments are being taken on its own, given that the government is undergoing a period of constitutional reform. And there is, in fact, a draft new constitution, which we had paused. We received the report of the Constitutional Reform Commission, and I want to put on record again our gratitude to the Commission and to its chairman, the Most Honourable Retired Justice Mr. Christopher Blackman, and all of the members of that commission. But there was one major lacuna that the government felt had not been addressed. We didn't necessarily agree with everything else, but for the most part, there was one major lacuna, one major omission, and that is the omission dealing with the responsibilities of citizens. The Constitution is set out initially in its preamble, and then it goes to deal with the fundamental rights of citizens. And there are a whole host of fundamental rights that we are all familiar of. The right to life, the right to freedom of association, right to protection of law, the right to protection of your property, subject, of course, in every instance, to that which is necessary to protect the public interest as broadly defined, or laws that already exist that require protection of citizens or property and whatever else. So you have a right to freedom of expression, but that is curtailed by your obligation not to libel or defame someone. But the government felt that the new Constitution of Barbados, unlike the old one, which speaks to the role of government and the role of different divisions that are related to government, should speak generally to the role of governance in the country, as opposed to the role of government. And that in addressing the issue of governance, that one of the things we have to address is the role of citizen. And citizen is the highest office, all of us agree, in a democracy. But a citizen that is told only of their rights or even a person who is not a citizen, that is told only of their rights as opposed to their duties, their responsibilities, may feel that they live in a country that doesn't require them to do anything. It's like living in a house without doing anything to help maintain the house, no chores, no payment of anything. It doesn't work. And if you leave a house unattended, sir, for a long period of time, as you know, without doing anything, the house starts to fall down. The plumbing stops working, the tiles get cracked up, the roof might have a leak, the doors start to fall off, the kitchen doors, if you're pulling at it all the time, year after year after year, the hinges start to fall and loosen. Sir, there is not even an inanimate object like a house that can survive without the active participation of the inhabitants. And like a house, sir, more so a nation. The nation requires the active participation of its citizens in order to be able to ensure that the nation is going in the right direction and reflects the kind of environment where everyone can live the best possible life that they have the opportunities that they need in order to improve the lives of their family, their community, and thirdly, have the ability to be able to protect the most vulnerable in the society, because we have a duty to protect each other. And of course, to protect the environment within which we live, whether it is the land environment or the marine environment, because, for example, if we allow the erosion of our coasts such that our aquifers have a situation where salt water gets into them, what they call saltwater intrusion, those aquifers are abandoned virtually forever. And therefore the access to safe drinking water is compromised, and the ability to sustain life is equally compromised. When you look across Africa, sir, and you see that large brown swath across the top of Africa, you begin to understand better why there is so much marginalization and insecurity. Because if people don't have access to water, how are they going to farm? How are they going to live? All of those things then become an issue, and simply the stability and security of that environment is compromised. So there are some clear duties that citizens are required to perform. And it can't only be about government. It can't only be even about the social partnership. It has to also be seen in the context of what individual citizens must do. So the government engaged some work to be able to see how best we can build on the work of the Constitutional Reform Commission. I've seen some preliminary stuff coming from them, and I expect that the full report will be in hand within 2 weeks, which will then, once Cabinet approves of what there is, and let me say, we are not going where no country has gone before. There are countries in the world that have treated this issue of responsibilities, and in fact, I would dare say that in the last 40 years of constitutional development, particularly in the Commonwealth, this issue of citizenship and duties, responsibilities, has become central to the debate and the discussion and the passage of new constitutional bills. Sir, the reality is that we are at a stage where we can look at the different precedents. Nigeria and India have a separate chapter that is focused only on responsibilities. There are other countries that may choose to intertwine those responsibilities within the fundamental rights chapter, which is okay, but does not give us the ability to communicate the message to ordinary citizens as simply and as clearly as we can. And then, of course, there is general reference and generic reference in the preamble. I think Jamaica is one that does it in a generic way in the preamble. And while we may want it in the preamble, we need fortification in the substantive parts that follow the preamble. And in this particular instance, the government is likely to look at something that can be used and understood from the smallest child in primary school right back to the oldest person in this country. And what does that mean? That typically the language that attaches constitutions is very complex and very much full of legal jargon. In this particular instance, the government is very clear that we want language that can be easily understood by the smallest child in Barbados. And in the same way, we learn the national anthem and we sing it. And in the same way we learn the pledge and we sing it, our children must learn what are their responsibilities to their country from primary school, and that must be reinforced all through school. And of course, our adults must also be exposed to it. And if the language is simple in terms of their duty to take care of themselves or others or the environment or whatever, then it becomes easier for us to remind persons throughout that this is part and parcel of their duty. And I say so, sir, because we live in a world particularly where individualism in this part of the world, in the Western Hemisphere, has trumped the collective action of community and state. And we have sometimes to be able to guide and to provide the guardrails as to what is acceptable and what is not. And one of the clear ways in which we can do that is through responsibilities. I'm not going to dwell on this anymore, sir, because this will come back to the Honourable Chamber. But I refer to it to let you know that we are not sitting on our hands, and that the process of improving the bill that we want to bring to Parliament is well on its way. And you may ask, well, why not wait for that to come? Because once we receive the report, the Honourable Attorney General has then to do the additional drafting. Then it must come to Cabinet. When it comes to Cabinet, because it is a constitution, is likely to say to the Honourable Attorney General, put this bill out there for the next 8 to 12 weeks, so that Barbadians can become accustomed not just with the report, but with the actual text of the Constitution. And anything less than 8 to 12 weeks would be doing a dishonor to the people of the country. But it doesn't even end there. Once we've done that, we then bring the bill to Parliament, whether in its state, how it left Cabinet, or whether with further amendment. We bring it to Parliament. We let an introductory speech be done here, as will be done in another matter today, and then we send it to the Governance Subcommittee. Now, we would expect typically that a bill in the Governance Subcommittee might take 6 weeks or 8 weeks for a normal bill, as happened with other pieces of legislation with the Parliamentary Select Committees. But in this particular instance, I doubt that we can get away with anything less than 12 weeks with respect to the Constitution, because the consultation will not only take place nationally, sir, it will also take place across the Barbadian diaspora, because this is the first new constitution that the country will be passing since 1966. It will be an appropriate debate. It will be an appropriate set of actions in the country's celebration of the 60th year of independence, the road to 60. Because we start the beginning of the 60th year, as you know, next week, Monday, on the 1st of December, and that will run till when we actually achieve our Diamond Jubilee, the 60 years, on the 30th of November 2026 next year. There can be no better use of our time during that 60th year than to settle this matter. We would have liked to have completed all of this earlier, but of course, we were dealing with a number of things from the back end of COVID right into given time, and the Constitutional Reform Commission requested additional time from the Attorney General to be able to do their work. Twice they requested an extension. They traveled across the diaspora. They traveled up and down the length of Barbados. People may have different opinions as to what they agree or don't agree, or whether the report was progressive enough or not. That's another conversation for another time. I simply addressed this morning the fact that that process of the new constitution would likely take anywhere from 5 months to about 7 or 8 months, and therefore the amendments necessary for the Electoral and Boundaries Commission would not be accommodated by reason of waiting for the new constitution. And since we were coming here with the EBC, we then decided to take out the other two matters which were discussed with the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, which we have included in here. I have no doubt that persons will have a perspective on the timing of the new constitution, and the government accepts that as a legitimate comment by anybody, because persons have a right to an opinion, but we have to deal with the reality of not just the substance of what we want to do, but the process of doing it in a way that is as inclusive as possible and as reflective as possible of the opinions of Barbadians, and that people must be given an opportunity to be heard at all stages with respect to this new constitution. So, sir, there is no more magic about these three simple amendments. One, to be able to allow the variation at the Electoral and Boundaries Commission between 80% to 120%, a 20% variation, because if we don't do that, almost 2/3 of the constituencies would have to be altered in a significant way in order to accord with that. And that, we do not believe, will allow us to have appropriate, what is the word I'm looking for? A seamless transition into a new process with respect to the requirement of the Commission to look and see whether there is need for any changes within the constitutional framework of the boundaries allocation and the numbers. Secondly, that we appoint a speaker from outside this House rather than following the British precedent of not fielding a candidate against a speaker, because the speaker is peculiarly handicapped, and I dare say this is an amendment that is probably 20 or 30 years late in this country. And other Caribbean countries have led us in this respect. And thirdly, that we give ministers the right of audience in either house without a vote on matters peculiarly to their portfolio, but the Attorney General on all matters, since the Attorney General, in fact, is part of the process for all bills and all resolutions. And I believe that it is fair to say that this will deepen the accountability of the executive to the Parliament once we put this. Sorry? Yeah. So what we have been doing in recent times, and I thank the Attorney General for reminding me, is that over the course of the last 2 years or so, 2-3 years, that the Attorney General, and in some instances the line ministers, have actually been meeting with senators from the other place in order to give them a brief. And in all my years in Parliament, that has never happened before this government. So that all we're trying to do is to take that informal process and to make it a structured process where the actual accountability of the minister plays out, because they are now having a legitimate right to be in the space of the other place, whether it is the House or the Senate. And that secondly, the Attorney General can explain why things are drafted a particular way, or may accept legitimate comments from members of either place, just as we do in here. The Attorney General invariably, who sits in the House, sometimes when members make a point that is a valid concern, we will have an amendment moved on the floor of Parliament. And by not having the AG in the Senate, it means that that process becomes more convoluted, more contentious, and undermines the integrity of the entire governance process. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, these are three simple amendments. They do require a constitutional vote, and therefore we treat it with the seriousness that that merits, but they are simple enough to allow us to be able to move without prejudice to our obligation to release by early New Year the new constitutional bill, which will be on the road, as I said, for a number of months, both pre-introduction to Parliament and post-introduction to Parliament, before it can be appropriately debated and passed. I'm obliged to you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Thank you. I'd like to move that.
The question is,
You want this?
Leader, of the opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I begin where the Honourable Prime Minister ended, and I quote, "These are three simple amendments." The Honourable Prime Minister will hear me agree with some of what she said, but the Honourable Member will not hear me agree with that statement that these are simple amendments. Indeed, I wish to vary from that and say that any constitutional amendment is a matter of great moment in the legislature. And indeed, it is a heavy moment, and so heavy is it that the Honourable Prime Minister thought that it became her duty to lift this heaviness out of the hands of the learned Attorney General. And for that, as a House, we are grateful. Again, I will pause and comment that whenever a matter of a constitutional amendment comes here, it requires a majority of the members of the House. And I say this not by way of mischief, but I think the public expects that when you are amending the supreme law of this land, as with the budget debate, you do expect greater attendance. And I don't think the government will mind me lamenting that when the Honourable Prime Minister began her speech this morning, she began to an audience of 13 members of the government, and that is not satisfactory. As I said, this is a matter of great moment within a legislature. This is a constitutional amendment that requires the presence and the vote of the majority of the members of this House. And I repeat that the Honourable Prime Minister ought to have had the respect of greater attendance. But that is a matter for the government. I will do my job according to my mandate. Now, I am going to say a few things in treating this debate as more academic than political. Of course, occasionally I will pause for political comment, since this is also a political body. But Your Honour will indulge me in an academic enterprise across the face of the Constitution as it pertains to Parliament. This is what we are here about this morning. We are here this morning to fundamentally alter the Constitution as it pertains to the Parliament. We are here, and when I say we, I speak of the Parliament, and more particularly, the government is here this morning to alter not only the Constitution as supreme law, but the Constitution as of the Parliament. In other words, how this Parliament is constituted. I know it is a cognate debate, and Your Honour, you will allow me to focus with some greater emphasis on the amendment which seeks to change the nature of the office of Speaker. Let me explain to the public, as did the Honourable Prime Minister, that this amendment seeks to change the office of Speaker from one who is an elected member of the government, one who is an elected
representative of a constituency, and we will not hide anything, one who is partisan. For many years, and too many years, the office of Speaker has been filled by an individual who is partisan, and that is a matter of some regret, and I agree with the Honourable Prime Minister. In a modern democracy, you cannot have the person who oversees the business of this place sitting in that office that you occupy this morning, sir, while he is also a partisan representative of a constituency, and that is untenable. I mean, for many years I've wondered how this Parliament conducted its business. And I mean no disrespect to the institution, but a Speaker who sits in that position sits in a situation not only that is untenable, that can become farcical, legally and constitutionally farcical. Because here you're asking a gentleman to give rulings in contentious debate, and particularly in this Parliament as constituted, with 28 members on the government benches, one on the opposition bench, and he then, as you may well be today, he is asked to give rulings when there is dispute across the aisle. And how does he do that? Is he expected to be less than partisan when he is partisan? But principles of integrity would say to him that he must be impartial. And you cannot guarantee impartiality. What you can do is guarantee independence. And independence and impartiality are two different concepts, and that's why we're here today, sir. This Parliament is here today to legislate the independence of the office of Speaker. As I've said, this Parliament cannot legislate impartiality. And let us appreciate that distinction, that independence refers to the state of an institution. Impartiality relates to the state of mind. So that while you can guarantee the independence of the institution of Speaker, it falls to the integrity of the holder of the office of Speaker to determine whether he will be impartial. And that is where we are today. That is the juncture at which this Parliament stands today. I repeat that that the system has imposed very difficult standards on the office of Speaker. And this Parliament, this government comes here today to resolve that crisis. The government comes today to resolve that crisis by this amendment. But I cannot proceed to the finer aspects of the proposed amendment unless I remind the public in what I'm insisting, Your Honor, will be an academic enterprise. I will remind my audience, which is you, sir, and the people of Barbados, that the Constitution is the highest law in this country, and this may sound trite among lawyers, but speaking to laypersons need to understand the importance of the Constitution. That the Constitution, in a sense, rules this country. One may say it is an artificial document, but it pertains to the powers of real people, of human beings. And as an artificial document, while it attempts to control the conduct and limit the powers of real human beings, above and beyond that, it establishes what we call the state. and the institutions of that state. And I say this here very often, and Your Honor, I will never tire of saying it, because the public needs to understand the legal paradigm within which this country finds itself from day to day. And those three organs of the state, I repeat, are the cabinet, the parliament, this place, and the judiciary. And there's something called separation of powers, that the powers of each of those institutions must be separate, and that no one institution is superior to the other. The cabinet governs Barbados from day to day. The parliament passes law, as the Constitution says, for the peace, order, and good government of this country. And the judiciary adjudicates on all matters, whether of dispute or matters intended for declaration. In other words, sometimes a court is asked not to resolve a dispute, sometimes a court is asked to declare the law. And that is the sole and exclusive power and authority of a court. So that you have these three separate institutions which constitute the state. And I want to say that a constitution really is not such unless one is willing to pause and regard these three institutions as the pillars of the state. I repeat, the cabinet, very powerful institution. I think the people of Barbados, more now than ever, are aware of this. The parliament, obviously, is a very powerful institution. It passes law which governs the conduct of every individual in this country, including those who pass that law. And of course, as I've said, the judiciary stands apart, not above, it stands apart. And every matter of dispute or declaration which obtains in this country goes to that body called the judiciary. And as I've said, they are separate. That is why you have the doctrine, separation of powers. And it is precisely what it says. Powers are separate between these three institutions so that no one institution or one person will exercise tyrannical power. Beg your pardon? I hope you did not hear that, sir. But we need these moments sometimes. And so, Your Honor, please permit me to explain that. And one will hear lawyers and constitutional lawyers indicate that although you have a head of state, which in our system is the president, and you will have a head of government, which is the prime minister, and you will have a chief justice, who is the head of the judiciary. None of those persons rule this country. This country is ruled by a constitution. Isn't that a remarkable thing? An artificial document exercises rule over this country so that the actors, the human beings who believe that they may have all this power, that power is limited by the Constitution. Yes. The Prime Minister in this academic enterprise is engaging me, and I'm happy for that engagement. But I will say to the Prime Minister that the concept of parliamentary supremacy or parliamentary sovereignty is an English concept. It is a concept that applies in England because England does not have a written constitution. And at the heart of what they call British or English constitutional law is this concept of parliamentary sovereignty. They don't have a written constitution, and so Parliament is given sovereignty. Parliament in England can do almost anything without reference to any written constitution because there is no written constitution in England. In fact, the English constitution, they say, legal scholars will tell you that it is a series of conventions. And the Honourable Prime Minister did correctly this morning refer to an English convention. And I was so very pleased to hear the Prime Minister on her own academic expedition remind this country that one of the conventions within the English system, parliamentary and legal system, is that of the other parties agreeing not to contest during an election against he or she who will become the speaker. And I'm grateful, I'm indebted to the Honourable Prime Minister for sharing that tidbit with the It is more than a tidbit, sir. I want to assure the Honourable Member for St. Philip South that it is more than a tidbit. He seemed gleeful at that nomenclature, at that word. But it is a constitutional convention, and whatever criticism one reserves for the English constitutional system, there is always a concern. Whatever admiration one has, there's always the concern that a constitution or a legal system which rests on conventions can be seen as brittle. But the English have learned to maintain order and stability, not on the basis of the written law, but on the basis of human conduct. And that human conduct is described as a convention. It isn't written anywhere, but they subscribe to it. And they subscribe to it, they've subscribed to it over many, many years, and they have maintained that system. But I want to, as is my right, do a critique of this law. I don't think the government will be disappointed that I come here this morning to do my usual critique, as is my responsibility, of what the government brings here today. And my own concern is the timing. I don't think the Honourable Prime Minister, in accepting the weight of this matter, has convinced me that the timing of this amendment is critical. Yes, I did have discussions with the Honourable Prime Minister at her urging. I will say to the public what they probably do not know, that in private, the Honourable Prime Minister is very gentle. It is quite possible that even the members of this House do not know that side of the Honourable Prime Minister, that despite that very public persona of, let me say confidence, not aggression, confidence. When you meet the Honourable Prime Minister in private circumstances, you meet a very gentle lady. Yes, I am saying that. I think I am. And those discussions that took place with the Honourable Prime Minister, in her gentle state in private, were very cordial. And I concede that there was partial agreement. That the learned Prime Minister, the Honourable Prime Minister, and I agreed that the Constitution of this country and that this Parliament cannot continue to function with a Speaker who is institutionally partial. You cannot, and to make it plain for the public, in this dispensation, you cannot have a Speaker who has been elected as a Barbados Labour Party member of this Parliament. And since independence, that is what we have had in this office. Either a Barbados Labour Party Speaker or a Democratic Labour Party Speaker. Your Honour, we have to speak to the public, and we have to speak in terms that the public will appreciate. Not that the public doesn't understand the more complex matters, but we want to reach everybody today. The Prime Minister tried her utmost to reach everybody today. And that is why the piloting of this debate was lifted, this heavy debate was lifted off the hands of the Honourable Member for St. Joseph, and the Prime Minister was very careful, and she said, let me take this matter unto myself. And we are grateful for that. And the public is grateful for that. I come, Your Honour, to the details of the debate. As I've said, the Honourable Prime Minister and I agree that the office must be filled by a person who is impartial, and that the office must be independent. I've explained that independence of the office refers to the state of the office. No BLP or DLP should sit there. It is, in my deliberations, my cordial deliberations with the Honourable Prime Minister, I said to her, and she agreed, that the office must be filled by someone who is impartial. And there's probably no guarantee of impartiality, but the person certainly should not be a BLP nor a DLP in that office. I will say to the public what I submitted to the Honourable Prime Minister. I said then, and I repeat here, this is not that I'm disclosing private, gentle conversations, but permit me to repeat, sir, that my submission was that the office holder should sit in that office for 7 years. And I submitted 7 years because I felt that it would be a guarantee of some independence if the term of the office exceeded that of the term of government. In other words, if the government is sent here for 5 years, of course this government rejects what the public has done. The public sends the government here for 5 years, and for some reason the Prime Minister does not like the number 5. But my view is that if the Constitution, if the laws of this country give a government 5 years, and we are in here today as a parliament attempting to pass a law for the term of the life of an independent and impartial speaker, that office holder should exceed the life of the government. And 7 years is always such a good number. In the Bible, 7 normally finds itself relating to plenty and famine. Plenty and famine. I don't know how the public now feels about the past 7 years, but the public will be called upon to answer that. The public will be called to answer that question pretty soon. But, Your Honour, that is my own proposal, that the office holder should sit for 7 years, thereby exceeding the life of the Parliament, thereby relieving himself or herself from control. So that, for example, if on January 1st you have a new government, and on January 1st you have a new speaker, when that government is changed, as all governments must change and will, after that change, that necessary change has occurred, that person called speaker, his term continues. And he, having lived for 5 years under the previous government, will continue a life of relative freedom under a new government. And a new government being a better government, if he has been a good speaker, that new government will keep him. I wonder if I'm being prophetic here. Prophetic, not pathetic. Prophetic. You know, I wanted to hear the learned Attorney General on this as his swan song, as his last piece of significant legislation before he is asked to withdraw. His hastening him out of this Parliament, that process began on the weekend, and There are some, Your Honor, who will leave at the will of the people. There are some who leave at the will of the Prime Minister. Long live the Prime Minister. Long live the Prime Minister. Whatever sin the Prime Minister may have committed, I applaud the Honourable Prime Minister for asking the Attorney General to relieve this Parliament of himself when this term ends. I don't know why you're laughing, Your Honour. But I wish him well in his new life. And if you're hearing another voice, that is another voice that is being asked to depart. You see the public? Please stop me from digressing, sir.
Stay focused, sir.
Please stop me from digressing. But while the public is focusing on the Democratic Labour Party, a lot of people out there are being asked to depart. And the Honourable Member for St. Lucie,
Order, please.
keep them in order, sir, because their propagandists are around this country talking about who is leaving, and I look around this Parliament, and I am about to say farewell to a lot of the people that I love. No, the people that I love in here, the Attorney General, the member for St. Joseph, the member for St. Thomas, the member for St. Lucie. Poor fella. Please stop me from digressing, sir, but when they interrupt me, I will remind them not only as to the state of the office of Speaker, but to the state of the government. And that is the state of the government. The government that is about to dismantle, as we are dismantling this office. That's the point being made.
Focus on the subject matter, please.
We are about to change the nature of the office of Speaker, and while that is happening, the Honourable Prime Minister is changing the state of her party, and I really commend her for the surgical skill with which it is being done. The Honourable Member for St. Michael East, my heart is with him. But let us come back to the debate itself. When they interrupt me, sir, I will...
Stay focused.
Yes, I will stay focused. You're in the chair, sir, and I will not deliberate on your fate.
I have God.
Yes. So we come, Your Honor, back to the legislation. We do need those light moments. And we do need those light moments as statements of farewell, pleasant statements of farewell. There's another one to whom I am always tempted to refer, but I will leave him alone today while he looks in my direction. You know, the public knows, you know. The public knows. I say this Prime Minister is very gentle. This was a very gentle Prime Minister in the deliberations with me. But in public, the lady is wielding a scalpel. And a lot of you are losing your heads.
Stay focused, sir.
Yes, Your
Please.
Honor.
Thank you.
Now, we come to what will become Section 45A of this legislation, and it reads, "There shall be a Speaker and Deputy Speaker of the House of Assembly who shall be elected in accordance with the provisions of this section." Your Honor, this is purely academic and not intended to be confrontational. Come, let us reason together, saith the Lord. We come here in that spirit today. And I draw this Honourable House's attention, I draw your attention today to what will be the new Section 45A, subsection 2, or subclause 2, since it is a bill. Permit me to read it, sir. "When the House of Assembly first meets after any dissolution of Parliament, and before it proceeds to the dispatch of any other business, it shall elect a person who is not a member of the House of Assembly or the Senate to be Speaker." The words I wish to draw attention towards are the words, "It shall elect a person who is not a member of the House of Assembly." Now, those are important words, sir. The first not the first, the second subsection clearly defines the office holder as being not a member of the House of Assembly. So that is made clear. You have 30 people who come here, unfortunately today, and as most days, we don't get 30 people. I wouldn't want to breach the standing orders and count the number of persons here now, but when the chaplain said the prayers this morning, the government had 13 members in their seats. An improvement on last week when 9 were in their seats. So the public now knows that there is improvement. We've moved from 9 to 13. Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you.
You did, not I. You did. And you're a beautiful woman.
They focus.
Yes. Love. She can't help it. You know?
Please, please.
Yes,
Focus.
yes. And so the legislation describes the person as a member, as not being a member of the House. So that is clear. Now, Section 3 speaks rather differently. The Speaker shall, and I'm sure there's some explanation, I'm sure the Honourable Prime Minister will respond to this. This is academic, and if there needs to be a change, this government knows how to change its mind, this government knows how to change legislation. So this is not to confront the government, but let us pass law that is good law that is consistent. One of the virtues of law, sir, is certainty and consistency. And it says, the Speaker shall, by virtue of holding the office of Speaker, be deemed to be a member of the House of Assembly in addition to the 30 members. So that when the person is elected, the person who is elected is not a member of the House. So the 30 people go out there and identify someone, bring him or her in here, and make him or her the Speaker. After that is done, presumably, Section 3 then describes that person as a member of the House of Assembly. All this is written here. It's written there in English. It's clear that you search beyond the 30 members, find the person, and let us call him either independent, him or her, either independent or judicial. And after that person has been elected by this body, he or she becomes a member of the House of Assembly. 4 is a matter of some concern. Subclause 4, the Speaker shall, whenever on a division the votes are equal, have a casting vote. Your Honor, through you to the Honourable Prime Minister, I would humbly ask and respectfully ask that you revisit that. If the person is independent and impartial, and I add, and judicial, may I ask this government to review the stipulation that gives to that office holder a vote, even in this case, a casting vote. I don't think that that ought to be within the power of the kind of office that we are trying to create. The Prime Minister the Honourable Prime Minister would appreciate this analogy. I think years ago, the Honourable Prime Minister and I appeared in a case at the Assizes together. Both of our clients were found guilty, by the way. But that's not the point today. Yes, Honourable Member for St. Thomas, we lost the case. Beg your pardon? You won the appeal? But it is like a jury deliberating. And after or during the deliberation of the jury, you go and ask the judge to do a vote as to the person's innocence or guilt. No, that is not the role of a judge. That is not the role of judicial intervention. That is not the role of somebody who sits independently and who sits with impartiality. So I want to humbly and respectfully recommend to the government that that clause which gives a casting vote, that clause should be removed. This office, by the nature of this office, that person ought not to be given the power to vote. Now, suppose it is a matter that is very controversial. You're going to draw your independent speaker into the arena, so to speak. And even if it is a matter that is not controversial, principle would dictate, Your Honor, that you still not draw the office into the matter of resolution, into the matter of voting. Can you appreciate, sir, and you can, a parliament where the numbers are very close, 16-14, you don't get closer than that. Of course, it could be 15-15, and it may shock the public to hear that in a 15-15 parliament, the head of state can still order business to be done, and the head of state can still appoint a person to be prime minister based on the exercise of discretion. That person who commands majority support. And that is subjective, that is an opinion, that is a judgment reserved for one person, the head of state. But let me not belabor that issue and submit to you, Your Honor, that in a parliament which is, to use the term, a hung parliament, you're really placing a heavy burden, you're placing an unnecessarily heavy burden on an office that you call independent and impartial. In a sense, it is an unfair imposition placed on the mind, on the shoulders of the office holder. So I would ask the government to revisit that a casting vote is a serious thing. And it draws the holder of this independent and impartial office into a contest that may have grave consequences for public life. It may be a piece of legislation that is so hot and controversial that the office holder of speaker may wish to decline intervention, to decline the exercise of an opinion, because a vote is an opinion. Again, Your Honor, I would ask the government to reconsider that amendment. One visits this debate with the curious state of mind. Why are you amending the office, or why are you changing the office of Speaker, and not giving equal attention to the President of the Senate? I don't understand it. There's one parliament in this country, and when people hear the word parliament, admittedly, they think House of Assembly. And few people think Senate. But there's one parliament which comprises two bodies. The higher body, that is the Senate, and the lower body, the House of Assembly. And I don't know why this government is partitioning this matter in this way. What is so special about the office of Speaker that leaves the office of President of the Senate untouched? Your Honor, in my view, attention ought to be paid to both. Because I cannot support governmental activity that is now parceling out amendments. You come and you make fundamental amendment that affects this place and leave untouched the other place, although the two places are contained within the same institution, Parliament. These are but two subsets of one sect called Parliament. And it is rather untidy to change the nature of the office of he who presides over this place and leave untouched the office in the other place, the office of President. What is so compelling about the amendment brought in this place that ought not to apply in the other place? The other place deliberates on legislation and it does not become law unless the other place gives approval, so that the activity of the other place is not ceremonial. The other place, except for money bills, I believe, must act. And therefore, it has power that is as compelling as the power that resides in this place. And so I asked the government to explain why touch the office of Speaker. Has somebody forgotten to touch the office of President? And if you're going to make your Speaker independent and hopefully impartial, is not the President of the Senate who presides over that higher body? Is he not to be fixed with the same attributes of independence and impartiality? I beg your pardon, sir. I think so. I think so. As I said, it is a composite body divided into two. So in the event that the government has forgotten, again, it may be an occasion for delaying this proposed amendment to go back to the draftsman and ask the draftsman to spend a little more time dealing with both bodies within this institution called Parliament. As you know, Your Honor, the President of the Senate is always a member of the government, has never been independent of the government. And that is why I use the word untidy, because you fix untidiness here in this arm. This arm is certainly, this arm is certainly connected to the other arm, the other body. And you fix here, so you have, it's as if you have two flat tires at the front of the car, and you fix one and leave the other one flat. The car still will not run. Let this car run. And let this car run, let this vehicle called Parliament run with some order and stability. And if you fix the office of Speaker here, you are obliged to fix the office of President in the Senate. A flat tire cannot run with a tire that is full, certainly not at the front nor at the back. Maybe in its haste, the government forgot. And I say haste because I am going to venture a political opinion. I did promise this House that my intervention this morning would be mainly academic, but I did reserve the right to pause for political comment. And I do wish to pause for political comment. And to say to the Honourable Prime Minister who brought it here this morning, that if we are rushing this bill, this amendment bill here, that the public will want to feel certain that this bill is brought here as a matter of principle and not to fit a personality. And I'm going to, as the young people say, get real. We all know who holds the office. We all know who holds the office, and I will tread with some sentimentality here. I don't know if he's hearing me now, but I would have said this even if he were here. That sometimes principle collides with issues of personality, sentiment. I met the holder of this office many years ago in the 1970s at the university. And we never had occasion or cause for conflict. Not even in here, I think. And so there has been good relations. But must I allow good relations and a good history? We play cricket together, Your Honor. And when you play good cricket with a man, that relationship never diminishes. But of course, there are not many cricketers in here. So this is a foreign language to a lot of people in here. They never play. I believe you had a piece of the game, sir. But the point is, when you play cricket with a man at 15, 25, 30, that relationship on the field, in the words of C.L.R. James, goes beyond the boundary. It joins people, and whatever will be the future after that cricket, you never forget it. Even if you quarrel and you fight, even if you belong to two different parties, and you fight against each other in a constituency, there's still that emotional bond. It wouldn't stop me from trying to get him out to St. Michael Central, because I intend to do that. But there's that emotional bond. Beg your pardon? You can see. And so, in spite of that history of cordiality, that history of good relations, I must say today, I really must say, since we are all honest people, he and I, and he will appreciate that I will oppose any ambition of his to occupy the office of an independent and impartial speaker. Because since he and I know each other, and he appreciates my honesty, I was a very honest batsman, he was a very honest spin bowler. He bowled at me, never got me out. And he expects my honesty to continue, and say to him, through you, sir, that as I told the Honourable Prime Minister, this country will not be persuaded that the present holder of the office of Speaker could occupy that office now, and after the passage of this amendment, continue in the office of independent Speaker. Cannot happen. Cannot happen. Lord Chief Justice Hewart spoke about the appearance of justice, that it must not only be done, but be seen, manifestly be seen to be done. And I say to the Honourable Prime Minister, that is not justice. And the Honourable Prime Minister referred to natural justice this morning, and one of the other features of natural justice is fairness. And it would be unfair to the public, it would be unfair to the Honourable Speaker, as he is presently, to occupy the office that he does now, and then hold ambitions to occupy an office of a different nature. He cannot cease to be a partisan speaker today, Tuesday, and come back next week and tell the public, I am no longer a partisan speaker, I am independent and impartial. Not in this Barbados, not in this Parliament. So if those are ambitions, and I did say I would make political comment, and I do make political comment on behalf of a public that is interested, so that it is a caution to the government. It is a caution to the government that if we push through this amendment, if this Parliament with its abundant government numbers manage to make this the law, against what may be public protests, then the government would be compounding its problems, its many problems within the public domain, by seeking to retain the present hold of the office after this amendment. But I have something else to say. And it is part legal and it is part political. We are curious. I heard the Honourable Prime Minister say today that the process, and I'm quoting, the process of the new constitution would take 5 to 7 months. This government's term ends constitutionally, I believe, in January 2027. Yes, January 2027, constitutionally. 90 days for the first day of Parliament. Well, yes, you have a lot of time. You have a lot of time. The public wants to see the government take that time to improve lives. And if, obviously, if you can't get it done well, the government knows what to do. But we could meet cordially, as we always do, in private. And if the Honourable Prime Minister is now asking me to help her to set an election date, Your Honour, I am willing. And I will put it in an envelope and give you, sir, and give to the Prime Minister. But as with the proposals of that, we will reserve our numbers. But, Your Honor, if the Honourable Prime Minister says that a new constitution would take 5 to 7 months, the government is within the time that allows it, before the end of its term, to do that. And so the public will ask the question, but if you can bring, you being the government, if you, the government, can bring a constitution within 5 to 7 months, why is the government, as vultures do, you're picking at the constitution? We've had, within this term, maybe wrong, about 3 or 4 amendments to the constitution. I analogize with a vulture picking at a body. And I use the word picking at. A vulture waits until the body is dead, circles, and when it is sure that the body is dead, it goes and picks at it. I would urge this government to stop picking at the body politic like a vulture. Come with an entire brand new constitution. This government mandated an entire commission to do constitutional reform. That constitutional reform committee completed its work, went up to the head of state, and presented a new constitution to Her Excellency. I understand a few of them were put in the supermarkets. Of course, the people of Barbados were more horrified at the high prices in the supermarkets and paid very little attention to the document. So we don't know what happened to them. But the fact of the matter is that this government was handed a new constitution. I have not seen it, but it was described as a new Republican constitution. And it is that which the people of Barbados had awaited for a long time. And we expected either that the government would come back to the public, although they had gone to the public before in a limited way. But you come back to the public, and if you believe that the consultations were adequate, come to the Parliament. It's been there for a while. It was there since last year. And if that new constitution was there since last year, what is the problem? Why can't we see it? Why is the Honourable Prime Minister begging for more time? 5 to 7 months. Bring it. Don't come to the Parliament today and try to make of a speaker what he cannot be. And at best, don't come to the Parliament today and pick at the Constitution. Please, government, bring the whole thing. Bring the whole thing. And beyond that, we had a parliamentary review commission, and the Honourable Prime Minister referred to both today. You had a constitutional review commission, work completed. You had a parliamentary review commission, work completed. I took opposition, of course, to both commissions. Both commissions should have been won. Because I began by arguing and hopefully demonstrating that you do not discuss a constitution unless you discuss the pillars, one of the pillars of the constitution, the parliament. And having pulled parliament away for separate review, I think that became an untidy exercise. Maybe the two commissions ought to have been joined, and the Prime Minister always says, many hands make light work, and those many hands could have joined and made light the work of any amendment to the Constitution and any amendment or modernization to this Parliament. And we agree, as I said before, that this Parliament needs to be modernized by having a Speaker who is independent and impartial. But my complaint today, sir, as I said, partly political, partly legal, is that government has lost a lot of time, government is losing a lot of time, government has lost a lot of time in presenting to this public a genuinely new Republican Constitution. Now, if today's amendment is an aspect of a Republican Constitution, we applaud it. But what we cannot and will not applaud is this incremental, that's the word I'm looking for, this incremental attention to constitutional change. Let us make the change once and for all. I don't know, though, if the public will have this government for another 5 to 7 months. We don't know. I know the government is meeting a public that is very impatient. And as much as impatient as the government seems to rush back to its fate, I think the people may be ready for the government to visit them with an election. But the final decision rests with the government, and I ask the government not to be afraid of fate. They try to dissuade me from quoting Shakespeare. I don't know why. But like death, it will come when it will come. The election and the demise will come. It will come when it will come. So that I ask the government to do one of two things. Either go to the people now, or take the time and do a new constitution. So that I really must object today to this amendment coming at this time. Although I have in principle agreed with the Honourable Prime Minister privately and publicly that you need a Speaker who is independent and impartial, please, my agreement extends to the wish that this ought to be done as part of larger constitutional reform, within a larger amendment to the entire Constitution. Indeed, not an amendment, but with a brand new Constitution, not an amendment to the existing Westminster, because that creates another philosophical and legal and jurisprudential dilemma. Because while the modernization of speakership is progressive and maybe Republican, you are inserting progressive change, Republican change, into a Westminster document. I use the word untidy, Your Honor, and I continue on that basis to use the word untidy, because the government is creating a conundrum, an even greater constitutional dilemma. You're creating a situation in which there's a clash of constitutional and legal values. Because, Your Honor, a constitution is not only about prescriptions and fundamental rights and so on, as the Honourable Prime Minister indicated today, but a constitution embraces cultural values and political values. And there must be always a clash of values between republicanism and Westminster. I've said it here before, and I'm going to repeat it, Your Honor, if you will allow me to repeat it today. Westminster derives its power from the top. At the apex of Westminster rule was the monarch, and all persons who served within Westminster served as subjects. That's the term they use, a term that must now be derogatory. Everyone served as a subject of the monarch, of the queen or the king, as the case may be. In republicanism, power derives from the bottom. It is the people. You're really empowering people. Whereas under Westminster, the power of the monarch is preserved, and all persons serving within that state serve as agents or subjects of the monarch. In republicanism, you serve genuinely as representatives of the people. And that is the fundamental difference between the American system and the English system. The fundamental difference between Westminster and republicanism. And so, those are the political, cultural, and jurisprudential values that inhere within each constitution, whether it is Westminster or Republic. Here we are coming with an amendment today, which in principle is progressive. Progressive because, as we've said, and we must remind the public, that a speaker cannot be a constituency representative. It is unfair to the constituency, it is unfair to him, it is unfair to the parliament, it is unfair to the constitution, it is unfair to the people. And Your Honor, I feel very sorry for the gentleman. That going on 8 years, all he comes in here and does, and this is not him alone. For the last 60 years, the speaker has come in here and has had no power, no opportunity to represent his constituency. That is not fair, and that is why the amendment is progressive. That is why the amendment is long overdue. But I caution the government, do it within larger constitutional reform, so that you don't have the dilemma of a clash of political and cultural values between Republican reform and the retention of a document that is fundamentally and substantially Westminster. That is the point, sir. And that's where we are today. And that is why I don't object to the amendment, but I object to the timing of the amendment, and I object to the amendment being done as an individual amendment, separate and apart from the rest of the Constitution. I have indicated before, Your Honor, and in closing I will indicate again, that it becomes all the more untidy because you're paying attention to this House of Assembly and you have forgotten the Senate. And law does not become law unless the Senate participates. And if you're going to make the office here independent and impartial, you are obliged as a government to make the office of presidency of the Senate in that body equally independent and impartial. There has to be some explanation though, sir, why the government is paying attention to the right tire and leaving the left tire flat. This constitutional vehicle will not move today with this amendment, even if passed. And I wonder what the other place will say when it comes there, but that is their business. This is only my prescription. I've already spoken as to the question of a casting vote. I object to that, sir. I will come to the question as to how this person, under this amendment, becomes the Speaker expected to be independent and impartial. Subclause 5 of 45A speaks to how this new creature under the Constitution is elected. Permit me to read it, sir. When the House of Assembly first meets after any dissolution of Parliament and before it proceeds to the dispatch of any other business except the election of the Speaker, the House shall elect a member of the House who is not a minister or parliamentary secretary to be Deputy Speaker. Again, we're in choppy waters. Is the House electing this new independent and impartial Speaker, Your Honor? In a Republican system, which I have described as a system in which power derives from below, from the people, if the people ask for participation in the election of a Speaker to a place that passes law and all law that affects the people and controls the powers of a government, and controls the power of all public officials, and the people should ask that they be allowed to elect that Speaker, what say this government? In republicanism, in the spirit of republicanism, will this government reject that protest from the public? Now, if the Speaker and or the Deputy Speaker is elected here, we go right back to the problem that we have tried to solve. We imbue or endow that honorable office with the taint of partisanship. A man or a woman who is elected by a government whose numbers are in the majority will prevail. And as soon as he becomes elected, Your Honor, by a parliament, by a government in majority, the public is entitled to say, but look, you all told me you're bringing somebody who is independent and impartial, and you elect them. Well, I'm entitled to stop believing that they're independent and impartial. So how do you resolve the problem, Your Honor? The same way in which the 30 come in here by the will of the people, should not that person of independence and impartiality come in here at the will of the people? The alternative is that if the Parliament elects him, the people will lose confidence that he is indeed independent and impartial. Again, if it is the case that under the new system, the new Speaker is elected by Parliament, I humbly and respectfully ask the government to revisit that proposal and to have the Speaker popularly elected and not elected by partisan exercise of a vote. As I said, if he is elected by partisan exercise of a limited vote in this place, it's all over. It's all over. The character of independence and impartiality is lost. And when he makes rulings in here, thereafter, some members of the public will say, well, you know, the government elected him. What do you expect? Which is the risk that you face in that office, sir. That it is your integrity, which we don't challenge, and I will pause and say that your rulings from there have always been fair. But it does not prevent the public from saying, well, look, the Speaker or the Deputy Speaker is a card-carrying member of the Barbados Labour Party, and that they are expected to make rulings favorable. I'm reflecting the views of the public, Your Honor. And so it makes this amendment even more progressive and necessary. But if you make the amendment which is necessary and progressive, have it cleaned, have it shorn of all suspicion of partisanship. Do not allow this body to elect the Speaker and or the Deputy Speaker. Let that person come as pure, well, I don't like to say as pure as the driven snow because I know very little about snow. Oh, sorry. Oh. Yes. Okay. I've said all that I want about you anyhow. Yes, so that you don't take the vehicle forward and reverse it. You're reversing back into partisanship. So simply, Your Honor, I will ask that the office be elected by the people. Now, I have approximated this office, the judicial office, and we live in a system in which people will find it rather strange that people become judges by way of election, but there's precedent for that. We all know that in the United States, New York especially, judges are elected. Judges out there campaigning like politicians. So there's nothing wrong with a man or a woman who wishes to be a speaker of this place or a president of the other place. Go out there and campaign like anybody else. That is republicanism for you. You must be there by the will of the people. And there's nothing infradig about campaigning like politicians. Of course, you don't wish to campaign like certain politicians. Good. But let them become subject. Let them lose this belief that there's something inherently dirty about politics and there's something inherently dirty about parliamentary service. Service is honorable. And for the Christians in here, we know that at the heart of the Christian exercise is service. That's what we're here about. I often say that people become distracted now by celebrity. But I am certainly not a celebrity. I am a man given to service. And to serve in a constituency, serve in this parliament, and to serve in my country. And I mean that. It's about service. And so, the new speaker in a new dispensation must feel similarly, that he or she is about service. And as I said before, it is worth repeating, there's nothing infradig about campaigning for the office, asking people to invest in you, their confidence that you shall serve this body at high level and do it fairly and with impartiality. That's not a lot to ask. You can't legislate integrity, but it is not a lot to ask. And therefore, Your Honor, I close by expressing principal support for the independence of the office of Speaker. I, however, oppose the legislation being separate and apart from larger constitutional reform, so I do not support it. It is a matter of some regret that the government has had reports from the Parliamentary Reform Commission and the Constitutional Reform Commission, and that it has made no use, absolutely no use, of those reports. And we must now remain suspicious as to why this amendment, this partial amendment of larger reform, is necessary today at the end of November. Why? And we ask the question, you see, Your Honor, we must speak in here with courage. We must speak with courage. And sometimes, and oftentimes, the truth takes courage. And I must and will have the courage to ask this government, why does this separate amendment become urgent at this point in time? And to warn the government that if it is related to personal ambition, all the more so must it be rejected. You cannot amend the Constitution to satisfy personal ambition. It matters not to me who is running in St. Michael Central. What matters to me is that a Constitution must be there to protect all persons. And a progressive amendment is tarnished, becomes tarnished, Your Honor, by motives that may be narrowly political. I have to speak the truth. And if that is not the intention of the government, I warn the government that that cannot be the purpose, the motive behind this amendment today. It would be wrong. And Your Honor, that is my warning to this government. I have spoken as to the other details of the legislation. I'm summarizing, sir. And I have asked the government to place this within larger constitutional reform. I have pleaded with the government to take the time. If the Prime Minister, if the Honourable Prime Minister says 7 months, take the time and do it. And if the government is suffering a loss of stamina, well, do what needs to be done, and the next Democratic Labour Party government will do it sometime in the not too distant future. We will attend to the matter of comprehensive constitutional reform, so that the suspicion that attains this amendment today causes us to object to it. Why is it, why after 7 years, it suddenly becomes an urgent cause to make a speaker independent and hopefully impartial? What is the urgency? Yes, it may be urgent, but it was urgent 7 years ago. It was urgent 27 years ago. It was urgent 37 years ago, and 47 years ago, and 57 years ago, after independence. Maybe past governments were busy elevating this country, socially and economically and politically. And maybe the Constitution worked for those past generations. But in 2025, in a modern democracy, or a democracy that hopes to be described as modern, a speaker who is partisan, a speaker who is representing a constituency, cannot be a part of a modern democracy. That is our submission, sir. And therefore, we ask the government to do comprehensive reform. Again, if the government chooses not to do comprehensive reform, give up the government. It is as simple as that. Give it up. After 7 years and 4 years of republicanism, of formal republicanism, because that's what the republicanism in this country is. It is formal. It is making the head of state local. It is removing ultimate power, theoretically, from in the hands of Westminster, England, and placing it at the President's house. That is what it has done. It is to that extent, and only to that extent, that we can describe ourselves as Republican. Beyond that, Your Honor, we are still Westminster. And I know the government understands its own dilemma. And I repeat, do not attempt to resolve the dilemma by partial and or incremental amendment. Fix the entire Constitution, make the entire Constitution Republican, and not pick at it as a vulture picks at a dead body. This government is picking at a body politic that may be dying under this government. It needs new life. It needs new life. And I'm not here to embarrass the government. But if after 4 years you could not do it, do not try to do it now and do it incrementally and partially for a narrow political motive. That is not what constitutional reform is about. Constitutional reform pertains to a principle of elevating a country legally and institutionally. It is not about enfranchising an individual, and I've spoken as to my opposition to personal elevation within constitutional amendment. I dare say to my former cricket teammate, I'm sorry, sir. I'm sorry. But I'm here to speak the truth. And the truth that I speak today is that this amendment must remove itself from the prospect of personal ambition. And he's heard me speak the truth in here all the time. And today is not a day to abandon my truthful speech. I will continue to speak the truth in here. That is why I'm sent here. And if I'm to stay here, and I believe that I will, amidst the many departures that are pending on the other side, I intend to come back here. I intend to come back. And since he keeps noise, I will look across, and the Honourable Member for St. Lucie will be absent. Politically, the people in St. Lucie killing you. Because you killing them with brown water.
Stay focused, sir.
Oh, he's dead? Oh, I see. So, Your Honor, that is my position in relation to the amendment. I want to thank the government for bringing progressive legislation here, but I want to chastise the government for failing to bring comprehensive constitutional reform. And for that, the government must be condemned. Your Honor, I am obliged to you.
Thank you.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that this sitting be suspended until 12:40.
I beg to move that the sitting be suspended until 12:40 p.m. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it. This sitting is now suspended until 12:40 p.m.